this is where it gets complex, and I want to dig right into this. There has been the intimation, the claim, the straight up accusation that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, as chair of the Democratic National Committee, is doing whatever she can reasonably do to help Hillary Clinton become the Democratic nominee. And part of this goes back to her allegiance to Hillary Clinton, in that in 2008, Debbie Wasserman Schultz was the co-chair of Hillary Clinton's campaign, and we have no reason to think that since 2008, she no longer supports Hillary Clinton. First of all, we have that sort of bit from her background. Then we hear that the Sanders campaign says they notified the DNC about this months ago. The DNC didn't fix this data breach issue, and now they turn it into a big public scolding of the Sanders campaign just 6 weeks before the first primary. So based on that alone, Lewis, before we get into anything else, what's your sense about the goals of the DNC?
Well, the DNC is made up of people. People have a horse in the race, and, I don't know. I mean, it seems foolish to think that if she were actively trying to make sure Hillary became the candidate, that they would go unnoticed. But, what is it that she is actively doing to make sure that that happens? Or what are the claims?
The claim is, by not fixing this when Sanders told them about it in October, and now going and making it a big public story and publicly suspending Bernie, that it's all sort of meant to create this idea that, oh, can we really trust this guy? He's doing this with our data, etc. And further, when we talk about what Lewis's question, what is the DNC actually doing here? The DNC has been the key factor limiting the number of Democratic debates and putting multiple debates on Saturdays, right? This is a very clear way to reduce viewership, which is you put the debate on a Saturday and you don't really promote it very actively. You might have noticed that the Republican debates get far more promotion than the Democratic debates. Part of that may be because the Republican debates are abortive freak shows that are entertaining in nature in a way that the Democratic debates aren't. But Saturday night debates are not going to be nearly as watched. People are out. We know people pay less attention to politics on the weekends. That is another way in which the DNC, if they wanted to help Hillary Clinton, could certainly influence.
Yeah, because to me, Bernie Sanders is the winner, and Americans like what he has to say. And, he's clearly the guy when he's on stage with Hillary Clinton. So you're saying perhaps the DNC does not want the American people to see that, and that's how they help Hillary win?
I wouldn't even say that it's because Bernie is better than Hillary on stage or whatever. It's just that, generally speaking, when you have a sort of de facto frontrunner that is far more well-known, they benefit from less time when people can see alternatives. If it were reversed, it's not that debates help Bernie per se. I mean, they may because of his views, if people like his views, but it's the idea that when you don't give people as much airtime who are potential challengers to the de facto frontrunner, that helps the frontrunner.
Hillary has nothing to gain by being in these debates and being on, and then being televised.
No question about it. And then we now have numerous individuals saying, yeah, the DNC is unfairly helping Hillary Clinton. Former top Obama advisor David Axelrod tweeted, quote, "Without evidence that his hierarchy knew about data poaching, the harsh penalty against Bernie Sanders looks like the DNC is putting a finger on the scale." Then we heard from former Democratic presidential candidate and Virginia Senator Jim Webb, who tweeted about the data mining incident saying, quote, "Good for Bernie, the DNC is nothing more than an arm for the Clinton campaign." And this appears to go further, Lewis. I already mentioned the DNC and Schultz with the debate scheduling. We talked about that already. In addition to that, there are Hillary Clinton offices co-located at DNC offices. Vice News did a report about this where they exposed that the Clinton campaign has rented a campaign office within the Democratic Party office in Nevada, a crucial primary state. And a Sanders campaign spokesperson said nobody from the Nevada Democratic Party has talked to us about having office space there. So that seems to be another inconsistency. We saw the a DNC finance chair caught raising money for Hillary Clinton. The DNC operates under these rules where they're supposed to remain impartial during the primaries, but a top DNC official was caught raising money for Hillary Clinton. His name is Henry Munoz III, And he used to be a top fundraiser for President Obama. He became the chief of the DNC's finance operations a couple of years ago. And just over the summer, he was caught organizing a fundraising event for Hillary Clinton in San Antonio, direct violation of DNC rules. So a number of issues here. I don't care if Hillary Clinton wins because she's the best candidate. The point of the debates is not to be doing political posturing and negotiating and basically negotiating your way into the nomination. It's to figure out who the best candidate is. And if that's Hillary Clinton, if she's the most electable, if she's who Democrats want, by all means. But if the DNC is influencing, that's not good.
It's the whole thing kind of stinks. I mean, and the debates on Saturday nights that's the giveaway. So it's unfortunate. I mean, Bernie, her last name is Clinton. Dave, what are you going to do? She has the friends, she has the connections. Even in the party, Bernie is kind of an outsider. So
and of course, as an independent running as a Democrat, Bernie is literally an outsider in that sense. Although he does caucus with the Democrats. So we're going to continue following this. Send me your thoughts about whether you think the DNC is a good guy or a bad guy, not with a gun, but a good guy with the resources or a bad guy with the resources. Interesting video to show you. You might find this incredibly titillating. I have video of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump from recent debates, Democratic and Republican respectively, talking about Middle East policy. And it appears as though they have almost the exact same views. Noah Ferguson, our segment producer, researched this for us and put all the clips together, and we're going to go through them. A viewer wrote to me saying, you know, I watched the last Republican debate, I watched the last Democratic debate, and it sounded like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders said essentially the same thing about Middle East dictators. Let's take a look first at Bernie Sanders. Here is Bernie Sanders talking in the Saturday debate that you may not even have heard about, never mind watched, about Middle East dictators. Take a look.
Next, because I think the crucial comment.
I have a difference of opinion with Secretary Clinton on this. Our differences are fairly deep on this issue. We disagreed on the war in Iraq. We both listened to the information from Bush and Cheney. I voted against the war. But I think, and I say this with due respect, that I worry too much that Secretary Clinton is too much into regime change and a little bit too aggressive without knowing what the unintended consequences might be. Yes, we could get rid of Saddam Hussein, but that destabilized the entire region. Yes, we could get rid of Gaddafi, a terrible dictator, but that created a vacuum for ISIS. Yes, we could get rid of Assad tomorrow, but that would create another political vacuum that would benefit ISIS. So I think, yeah, regime change is easy. Getting rid of dictators is easy. But before you do that, you got to think about what happens the day after. And in my view, what we need to do is put together broad coalitions to understand that we're not going to have a political vacuum filled by terrorists, that in fact we are going to move steadily and maybe slowly.
All right. So, Bernie, against Iraq, regime change without planning for the consequences is a bad idea. The region was destabilized by getting rid of dictators. We created a vacuum which led to extremist groups, and we should be using coalitions, not going after this alone. We will now go to Republican candidate Donald Trump. Let's see what he had to say about dictators in the Middle East.
To Russia. We're going to talk about Assad in a moment. Mr. Trump, are Americans safer with dictators running the world in the Middle East?
In my opinion,
Go ahead, Mr. Trump.
in my opinion, we've spent $4 trillion trying to topple various people that, frankly, if they were there and if we could have spent that $4 trillion in the United States to fix our roads, our bridges, and all of the other problems, our airports, and all of the other problems we have, we would have been a lot better off. I can tell you that right now. We have done a tremendous disservice, not only to the Middle East, we've done a tremendous disservice to humanity. The people that have been killed, the people that have been wiped away, and for what? It's not like we had victory. It's a mess. The Middle East is totally destabilized.
Destabilized. Lewis, a lot of similarities there. And my point is not that Bernie's position is a right-wing position. My point is that Donald Trump could say almost anything at this point, and he has a cult of personality where right-wingers who would never support this stuff support it. Trump is saying instead of defense spending to oust these dictators, let's not destabilize the region. Let's invest that money in infrastructure. That is stimulus. That's what Obama did. He's talking about infrastructure stimulus. This is Trump, the leading Republican candidate, and his supporters don't care. They'll support his liberal position on that.
And it's common sense, and we agree with Trump.
Obviously. And
Yeah,
Bernie.
Yeah, and Bernie. But I guess getting into the political reasons for these wars and for toppling regimes is another topic. It is unnecessary, and okay, I mean, they both have a common sense take on the issue.
And it's just fascinating because Bernie Sanders is widely considered, by some, I mean, he's widely considered by those who have a sensitivity to this to be this far left guy. And then you have Donald Trump, who is considered to be this xenophobic, just kind of clueless right-wing guy. But is he really right-wing? Because he was a Democrat, but he loves the Republican Party. Anyway, on a fundamental issue of our time right now, which is thinking about the involvement of the United States in the Middle East, Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, the supposed far-left candidate, and this businessman outsider who knows nothing but is leading, have come together and have essentially the same point of view on Middle East dictators. Very, very interesting. And we're going to stay on top of this one. And I'm curious to hear thoughts about this from the audience. Remember that I am on Twitter at David Pakman Show and at DPakman. Lewis is on Twitter at Lewis Motamedi. We'll be back after this. Who has more support nationally, Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders? Well, if you look at the Real Clear Politics average of all polls, we can figure this out. Bernie Sanders currently has an average of 30.6% support among Democrats. Donald Trump has an average of about 34% support among Republicans. But there are more Democrats than Republicans, 30 to 28%. And if you include those who lean Democratic and those who lean Republican, that gets us to about 44% Democrats, 42% Republicans, which tells us that support for Bernie and Trump nationally is pretty close to even. It's pretty close to 50-50 nationally. Now, if we add to this that way more voters nationally are downright scared of Donald Trump being president compared to Bernie Sanders, it is very safe to say that Bernie Sanders has more support nationally than does Donald Trump. But how does media coverage compare, Lewis? Well, Media Matters reported that in 2015, Trump received 234 minutes of coverage from NBC, CBS, and ABC evening news broadcasts, looking at cable network news broadcasts. Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, 10 minutes. 10 minutes of coverage from the big three networks for Bernie Sanders. 23 times more coverage did Donald Trump receive than Bernie Sanders. ABC gave Sanders the least amount of time, only 20 seconds of stories broadcast about the Sanders campaign on World News Tonight. And there's another factor. Trump was one of 16 or 17 candidates for a while, and he's still one of 10, whereas Bernie Sanders is one of 3 candidates. And when you consider that, the disproportionately, exponentially more corporate media coverage that Trump gets versus Bernie is truly stunning. And there's a few hypotheses about this, Lewis. I mean, if I just told you Trump gets 23 times more coverage than Bernie, they have about the same amount of support nationally, why would you think the disparity exists in coverage?
Well, first of all, we can say with certitude that Donald Trump says 100 million times as many crazy things as Bernie Sanders.
Right.
And so he's making these statements and people want to hear it. It's good for business. It's good for ratings. It's good for the media. But at the same time, you have to wonder if corporate media is making a conscious decision just to give Donald Trump more time because he's, well, just that, I guess, the ratings machine.
I thought initially the sort of easy answer is ratings. Trump's better for ratings. And that does seem to be true. I mean, there's no doubt that Trump is better for ratings than Bernie Sanders. Then I started thinking, well, Donald Trump's ideas aren't really a threat to corporate media conglomerates in the way that Bernie Sanders' ideas could be. And then I started thinking, well, also corporate media is more right-wing and maybe they actually just want Trump to win. I think mostly, though, it is the ratings issue. And I am often interested in going deeper than that. But I think a big factor here is that people are just fascinated by Trump. people agree way more with Bernie's ideas. When you actually ask people, hey, do you think the government has some responsibility to provide a basic level of health care to everybody, regardless of ability to pay? That's an issue where the majority of this country agrees with Bernie Sanders. But that's not very exciting. The ratings are with Trump, and I think that is the biggest piece of the Trump-Bernie ratings gap.
I think so. And I don't think corporate media is focusing long term here, because
No.
if they were, they would be giving Trump less coverage, and they would actively be trying to make sure that he won, because then they would have 4 years of this kind of thing, assuming there's no impeachment. And that would be fantastic for business.
I was recently talking to a bunch of progressive hosts, and we were all just, very casually talking. And the conversation came up of, listen, this is maybe the scariest year with regard to Republican presidential candidates. I mean, it is so important that a Republican does not win in 2016. And at the same time, this is the year where we all stand the most to gain from one of these right-wing nuts winning, because progressive media will grow so much if someone like Trump or Cruz or Rubio gets elected. And of course, we were just sort of speaking extemporaneously. None of us actually wants a Republican to win, but we were all recognizing that if we get another 4 years of a Democrat, particularly given that we're down to just two pretty reasonable candidates by and large, aside from disagreements that we may have with either of them, that's not going to be as much of a catalyst for interest in shows like ours. I mean, there's no doubt that if Trump or Rubio or Cruz wins, shows like ours benefit greatly. And still, everybody said it is so important for our country that these nuts not win.
Yeah, I mean, what's more important overall? No question. But the good news is, if there's some good news, that campaigns seem to start earlier and earlier every election cycle. So I don't know in how many years, Dave. The day after the election, the next round of campaigning will start, and then we'll just have wall-to-wall madness all the time.
All the time. It's an exciting time to look forward to, no question about it. Speaking of which, the corporate media is totally silent as a Trump supporter is arrested stockpiling bombs specifically to kill Muslims. I'm talking, of course, of a neighborhood in Richmond, California, which is very close to San Francisco. The neighborhood had to be evacuated when police say that 55-year-old white American man, William Selly, was making bombs in his home with the intent of using them to harm the Muslim community. Police got a tip from a caller on December 17th who said, listen, this guy, William Selly, is making devices and threatening to harm Muslims. For whatever reason, it took police 3 days to actually follow up about it. Police removed a device from the home in the 5100 block of McBride Avenue, and the Walnut Creek bomb squad detonated a device before neighbors were allowed to return to their homes. Selly was naturally arrested. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Richmond police are not elaborating on the threats other than to say that Selly's actions and statements drew the attention of law enforcement and were concerning to others. We have some of that elaboration, though, Lewis. Number one, Selly appears to be a very ardent supporter, fervent, we could even say, of presidential candidate Donald Trump. A post on his Facebook page said he would follow Trump, quote, to the end of the world. I mean, I don't know if that's a fervent support or mental illness. Quote from this man's Facebook page, Donald Trump's on again. I'm happy. Leader's okay, but this guy's a great point man. I'll follow this man to the end of the world. Maybe this guy wants the end of the world to come sooner than later, and that's what he meant. I don't know. He's also used his Facebook account to complain about Syrian refugees, Democrats, and Republicans who just aren't conservative enough, like Donald Trump, although that's not William Selly's complaint. He seems completely unaffected by the fact that many of Trump's ideas are indistinguishable from Bernie Sanders, as we talked about yesterday. He's a self-employed plumber. He complained that he lost work to undocumented immigrants who he believes came to the U.S. to collect welfare benefits. I love this, Lewis. These immigrants who are so lazy, they're lazy and they come here and they steal our jobs. Well, if they're crossing borders to work not the best jobs in languages that aren't their first language, isn't that very industrious? What's lazy about that, Lewis? I will never understand this stupid double standard. The lazy immigrants come to a new country and take jobs and work. That's so lazy of them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other examples of this type of hypocrisy that we've heard from politicians and pundits and all of that. But,
Yeah.
it all kind of blends together. But, it's It's all the same.
Are they lazy or are they unemployed and collecting welfare benefits? Or is it somehow both?
Like Donald Trump hiring these, I guess you could say, illegals, as he'd call them.
Yeah.
They're building all these giant buildings he's constructing.
Yeah, William Selly should think about that. Right. Some of these undocumented immigrants that are so lazy that they're working are being hired by Donald Trump's contractors to build the buildings that Trump puts his name on. It just doesn't make any sense. And
his Donald Trump hat was probably made in Mexico.
Maybe so, yeah. And according to a tally from the New America Foundation, white right-wing extremists were the most dangerous terrorist groups in the United States, despite the fact that people often focus on just 9/11. Not that we shouldn't focus on 9/11. 9/11, hugely tragic and important and influential and impactful. But since 9/11, the majority of domestic terror incidents are being conducted by American-born white dudes. So you should remember that. And corporate media essentially silent on this entire story that a Trump supporter was caught stockpiling bombs specifically to kill Muslims. Not really interesting to corporate media. Alternet wrote about it, Slate, etc. We're covering it, but just not a good corporate media story, apparently.
Well, a lot of the time, if it's a white boy like this, it's usually not a story unless the attack is successful. And then it's a story. It's still a story if it's a radical Islamist.
Yeah, it's not interesting because police were able to do their jobs, and even though it took them 3 days, they did follow up on the call that this guy was stockpiling weapons and posting crazy stuff to Facebook. Because police successfully stopped this guy, no reason to cover it. Let's pretend it was never a risk.
Yeah, well, hey, it's about ratings, so maybe it's not good for ratings. I think it's still important information.
We'll take a break. After the break, Bernie Sanders' campaign has reached a very, very interesting milestone. I will tell you what it is next. More bizarre behavior statements from Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. He gave a speech yesterday attacking Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, former New York Senator Hillary Clinton, and it got uglier than usual. This is so weird. We have the footage. Trump said that Hillary got schlonged. And Lewis, as you know, this is schlong is a slang term for a penis, and just very, very strange, really just getting ugly. Let's take a look at the video of Trump here.
It's been involved and Hillary has been lost. As you take a look, even a race to Obama, she was going to beat Obama. I don't know who'd be worse. I don't know. How does it get worse? But she was going to beat, she was favored to win, and she got schlonged. She lost. She lost. But I watched her the other night. It was hard. It was really hard because there were a lot of other things on better, including reading books and reading financial papers, which I actually enjoy reading. But I watched her the other night, and I said, this is not a president.
Right. And of course, when we see Trump, the first thing we think of is president. Trump also went on to say that it was disgusting when Hillary Clinton went to the bathroom during the debate. He might as well just go all the way and say Hillary has cooties and is the teacher's pet. That's the level we're operating at here.
Yeah, it's kind of childish. When you got to go, right? But this is what people like. It's part of this whole entertainment thing.
It reminds me of when Trump said Megyn Kelly had blood coming out of her whatever, right? Saying Hillary got schlonged is reminiscent of that.
It is. Yeah, it's part of his charm. And I don't think he really needs to trash Hillary. Right. Maybe it helps him. I don't know. It just seems like a strange tactic.
My real confusion is how anybody goes to these Trump rallies and sits through this stuff, because the majority of a Trump rally is he reads polls. He takes polls out and he just reads through poll results. That's the first part. That's how he opens these things. Then he brings black people on stage. Like at a recent Las Vegas rally, he's like, oh, here's black people that like me. And he just displayed 4 black people on stage. It was completely nuts. Then he insults other candidates. And then when a fight breaks out, he narrates the fight. He does almost like a boxing commentary. That is a Trump event.
Okay, but I think you'll probably agree with me when I say this. You'd probably rather go to a Trump event than a Clinton event.
Maybe that's fair. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. But from a media analysis perspective, not because I'm interested in the guy.
Dave, you would just have a better time. Forget the analysis, forget the politics. It would be more fun.
Good thing I'm white Hispanic, or I might really be in trouble if I went to one of these Trump rallies, that's for sure. A conservative broadcaster who once threatened to shoot Hillary Clinton in the vagina was arrested on a weapons charge in Ohio. This guy looks calm in this picture. After he was mistaken for a suspect on the terrorist watch list, Pete Santilli was stopped Friday afternoon in Newtown, Ohio, after police spotted him driving slowly, 20 miles per hour, in a 50 mile per hour zone and suspected him of texting while driving, according to the Cincinnati Enquirer. Officers stopped him, detained him, and a woman riding in his SUV. One of their names was on the National Terror Watch list, but police determined after about 45 minutes that the names were similar, but not actually the same names. Police did find a 9mm Smith & Wesson in a bag between the passenger's feet while searching the vehicle. Here's the interesting thing. Secret Service investigated this guy, Santilli, in 2013 after he said he wanted to shoot Hillary Clinton, quote, right in the vagina for her involvement in, who even cares, some conspiracy theories, doesn't even matter. The 50-year-old Santilli was charged with illegally carrying a concealed weapon without a permit. He regularly hosts militia leaders and other right-wing extremists on his program called Off the Hook in the Morning. I'm actually, it turns out he was on the terror watch. He wasn't really on the terror watch list, right? It was a similar name. If you regularly interview militia people and make threats about shooting a politician and have guns, doesn't that warrant being on the terror watch list? I mean, if not this guy, then who is my question.
Well, I mean, there are plenty of shows hosted by nuts, having nuts on all the time. And when someone says they want to shoot Hillary in the vagina,
yeah,
I think it's usually taken pretty lightly because it's just kind of absurd. I mean, it sounds like satire.
Right. Nobody would really shoot her there. They'd shoot her in the chest if they really wanted to kill her. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't think she's going to be having any more children. I mean, I don't know. Bad joke, but you take this lightly because this is someone who is a radio host. He's a shock jock, if you will. The whole point is to say crazy things. Just some confusion from law enforcement.
He's convinced that it was no accident. He doesn't believe the story about, there's someone with a similar name, but it's not you. He thinks that it was for political reasons, that his name actually was on the terror watch list. But that's such a weird argument because if your name really was on the terror watch list, be it because of political conspiracy or by accident, then there should be repercussions to that. The police looked into it and said, it's not actually you. So the theory is bogus because if you're going to be put on that list for political reasons, at some point something would be done as a result, as opposed to just pulling you over because you're going 30 miles per hour under the speed limit and then saying, it wasn't actually you on the list.
Yeah. But are people put on that list for political reasons? I mean, wasn't Ted Kennedy put on a no-fly list or some type of watch list?
I thought that was just an accident. That was the no-fly list. And remember, the no-fly list and the terror watch list, two separate lists. People think they're the same. They're not. Both of them can be bogus in some cases. That's what they share in common, but two separate lists. And I think it's safe to say, Louis, you're not on either.
Not that I know of, but all that talk about me accidentally bringing that big knife on a plane,
yeah.
Who knows if someone watches the wrong clip.
So much to talk about on this Christmas Eve show. In creepy and bizarre news, Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz turned one of his campaign events into a sort of prayer revival earlier this week. This gave audience members the opportunity to pray that Ted Cruz become the next president of the United States. This is just craziness. They brought on stage this pastor named Galen Wiley of Clay Road Baptist Church in Houston, and apparently Ted Cruz's father, Rafael Cruz, who is completely off the deep end, was sort of brought into his religiosity by this pastor, Galen Wiley. So in my mind, I want to see how Rafael Cruz got this nuts. So I was endlessly fascinated to see this pastor, Galen Wiley. Let's take a look at the prayer revival. This is considered a legitimate presidential primary campaign event. Take a look.
Realizing that God is in control, and Ted Cruz is committed not only to conservative philosophy, but with conservative theology as well. He's going to make us a great president to make our nation a great nation again.
Yeah. Get the kids out.
I want you to do something.
Please.
I want all of you to stretch your hands out toward up here. We're going to pray.
As far as they go.
If you have your hands stretched out, we're going to lay hands on Ted Cruz.
We're going to touch him.
Father, in the name of Jesus and by the power of the Holy Spirit,
Yeah.
I come to anoint my brother in the Lord.
Oh.
That son, Lord, that's raised up to follow you. And I pray, Lord Jesus, that he'll not let those who gave their lives in World War II, like my brother Preston did, go in vain. Like the thousands of others that are in this crowd that lost loved ones in the war since. And I pray, Lord Jesus, that you take the hands of this man and put the mantle upon him, that he might lead our land back to where we were, to the forefathers of our father and our mother, our God, Lord, of God, days
cut it.
gone
I think
by.
I'm going to be sick, Lewis. What's worse, a Trump rally or a Cruz rally? At a Trump rally, Trump reads polls, brings any token black people that he can find on stage to talk about how black people love him, makes fun of Hillary Clinton using the bathroom, and narrates the fights that break out. Okay, that's a Trump rally. At a Cruz rally, it's basically, is this pleading the blood of Jesus? Is that what they're doing? I don't really know what that is, but if you told me, oh, someone pled the blood of Jesus, this is what I would imagine it looks like. What's worse? I don't know what kind of rally is worse at this point.
I think the Cruz rallies are way more boring. I mean, the Trump rallies are entertaining. You get to see, what Trump is doing might be pretty boring as well, I guess. But interesting things happen at Trump rallies. I don't think there's anything interesting happening at this one.
I don't know that even God's prayer is going to make Ted Cruz the next president of the United States. I hope I'm right about that, Lewis.
Dave, I'll take prayers over campaign donations any day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's for sure. And who's the camera on anyway? I mean, I'm not sure. I think we were backwards there.
Were we backwards?
We were backwards, yeah. MSNBC executives, I would guess, are not particularly thrilled with an exchange that took place on Morning Joe this week. On Morning Joe, Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough were talking about what we have also observed the DNC doing, which is putting their finger on the scale to help Hillary Clinton. Is it really democracy if the DNC is helping to turn the Democratic primary towards one candidate and away from another, towards Hillary Clinton and against from Bernie Sanders? On Morning Joe, they seem to think much of what we thought. And from what we know about MSNBC, they're probably not too thrilled over there on the 50th floor about these comments. Let's take a look.
She's in pretty good place coming out of the debate.
There isn't really a nomination fight, is
Well,
there? This is set up?
There's not. Katty Kay, if the Democrats, I think for the first time in the history of modern politics, and I'm serious, you had a political party go take every measure they could for Americans not to see their candidates. It went up against, I think, a couple of football games. It was Saturday night opening of Star Wars. Not that they, well, actually, they would have known that when they set it up. Holiday season. Seriously, if you had worked any harder to not get people watching your candidates debate, you couldn't have done it.
Yeah, and isn't the next one on a Sunday night, too?
During the NFL
Even
playoffs.
worse.
Yeah, during
Even
the
worse.
NFL
During the playoffs. I mean, it's just...
At what point, Katty, does somebody call out Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the Democratic Party, and the Clinton
called
campaign?
Out. No one cares.
It's
Okay,
because,
so we know from what our friend Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks told us during his time at MSNBC, they're not thrilled at MSNBC with critiques of the Democratic Party. The White House reportedly went to MSNBC and said Cenk is being too critical of President Obama. We're not looking to do liberal critiques of President Obama. I assume, Lewis, that this little exchange is not particularly thrilling to many of the executives at MSNBC.
Probably not, but I do like how occasionally, especially on this show more than any other show on the channel, Mika or Joe will kind of speak out, maybe not, being as forward and blunt about it as they could be, but they will kind of speak out about the nonsense happening on the channel or with regard to the stories they're covering or something like that. Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, clearly MSNBC is rooting for Hillary.
It's an establishment channel, right? Even though liberal editorially, it's still an establishment channel, and we've talked about that. And, I agree with Democrats obviously more than Republicans. I agree with Bernie more than Hillary, but Hillary more than every Republican running. Is there an argument to be made, though, that in the same way we believe the Republican Party will not allow Donald Trump to get the Republican nomination, will the DNC not allow Bernie Sanders to get the nomination either, to whatever extent that they can control that? Are the situations more similar or more different? We'll definitely talk about this next week, the last week of the year, as we head into primary season. Let's take a break. So much to talk about today on Christmas Eve. Glad you're with us.